part of a vintage drum story, but it's on the Steve Hoffman forum. I didn't realize the Steve Hoffman forum existed, or Steve Hoffman. I mean, anyway, I don't mean to be so out of the loop, but Steve Hoffman forum. There's a fella on there. There's a drummer named Eddie Ho, who played on all kinds of stuff back in the mid to late 60s and probably into a sliver of the early 70s. Mamas and the Papas, Donovan, the Monkees, Pleasant Valley Sunday, I think he played on, amongst others. Now, I had an experience with, well, there's a fella on the Steve Hoffman forum that claims he's in touch with Eddie Ho, and Eddie Ho apparently is pretty lucid and like fielding questions and is, out there. So, I mean, out like in existence. Because I know for a long time, a lot of us drummers and musicians, a lot of people assumed he was dead. And, but apparently he's out there, and this guy is a serious drummer. And from the recordings I went back and found and listened to. But I mean, he's like, let's just say I think there's a lot of people, he's kind of been looked for, and he, at least according to this fellow on the Steve Hoffman forum, isn't like, excuse me, I want my privacy, leave me alone. Apparently he's like fielding questions and stuff. So anyway, so if anybody, go on to the Steve Hoffman forum if you have any questions. This fellow I think can ask Eddie Ho then the questions, because apparently he's in touch with a lucid, alive and well Eddie Ho. But I can tell you my own personal experience with Eddie Ho. Back in the 90s, when I was like, Joe Vintage Drum Collector, and I said in my vintage drum videos I put up where, in those days you'd go out and you'd have to put an ad in the paper. Well, what I did is I put an ad in the paper like old drummers seeking old drums, which is a tip I got from Bill Pace down in Georgia back in the day. And you'd get all these calls and you'd get, a lot of leads on drums, which if you watch my other videos turned out to be kind of fruitless, but you never know. But back in those days, pre-internet and everything else. But, so, at one point I found, locally, I used to live in Forest Park, which is where Eddie Ho was originally from, I believe. I found a Gretsch mid-late 50s, I guess. I forget, I'm not that much of a Gretsch guy. I was always more of a Ludwig guy, kind of Slingerlandy. Late 50s Peacock Sparkle, 22, 13, 16, and the snare was a matching 6.5 by 14 separate lug snare drum. These drums all had the clear interiors. I think they were, maybe they called them, in those days 3-ply, like the late 50s. Anyway, a nice set of drums. The floor tom needed work, blah, blah, blah. I fixed it up. But what happened is again, this was back in the day, like pre-internet. I mean, the internet existed, but, you'd put stuff in like Larry Levy's The Sheet or whatever, or John Aldridge's thing. But what I decided to do with this kit is I used to work for an outfit where the lady, very kind, God love her, let me use her storefront in Forest Park on Madison Street, the street of dreams. So I put the drums in the window, and to diehards like myself, I know finishes fade. I sort of put it back from the window, and I think the window did have that real thin, that plastic you pull down that would sort of protect it apparently from UV rays. That might not be true, but I just want to say that anyway, actually I really think it's true. But what I did was, in front of that, I put a sign that had my name and my contact number. It said Gretsch, late 50s, Peacock Sparkle. I found out they were Peacock from, I don't know, probably talking to Bill Pace or one of the guys, maybe Aldridge or somebody, I forget. So I had him in the window, right? So at one point, like a week into it, I got a call at home. Remember, I didn't have a cell phone back in 1997 or 1996. That from a guy, and he was like, kind of talk like this. He's like, hey, I saw your drums in the window, and I'd like to check them out. I'd like to come play them and take a look at them. I was like, sure, let me know when I can meet you there. And he's like, how about like in an hour? So I'm like, okay. So of course, to be honest, on the way over there, I'm thinking to myself, am I about to get rolled by somebody? You know what I mean? Like, go into the joint, and so the guy's like, all right, give me the drums and whatever else you got in this joint. You know what I'm saying? So I get over there, nobody's there. Go in the place, and I kind of get ready to sort of, show them the drums and, make sure there's nothing I forgot, like make sure there's not, I don't know, maybe one of the heads isn't tightened or whatever in case he wants to tap on it. So suddenly I'm looking at that, and I look out the window, and standing out there looking through the glass is a fella that looked very disheveled, you know, almost like, not totally like caricaturistically sort of homeless, but just a fella that, you know, looked sort of, you know, not all in the best of ways financially and maybe mentally, and he was standing, he was kind of looking at me, and he had sort of a beard, and his hair was all funky, and he had sort of an old dirty coat on, and his slacks, I think they were like blue flannel, they were just he looked just really crusty, and you know, and I was like, oh my God. So I went out there, not really sure if, actually I didn't even assume it was him. I went out there, I was like, hey, you know, he's like, hey, you know, I thought he was, you know, it was almost one of those points where I almost felt like taking some money out of my pocket and being like, hey, you know, and he's like, Terry? I was like, yeah. He goes, Eddie. I'm like, oh, hey, Eddie, because he said his name was Eddie on the phone. Of course, I had no idea. You know, I just thought it was a guy named Eddie who wanted the drums. So, right, so we get in and we look at the drums, and I'm showing him, and he, you know, he checks them out, and he pulls a wallet out, and inside it is a stack of 50s, like crisp, fresh, like right off the printing press, $50 bills. So he counts them out. I think I had them in the window maybe for 600, 700, or 800. I forget. You know what I mean? So he gave me the money. Give me the money. And so I'm like, well, you know, where do you want me to help you bring them somewhere? You know, I have my car. Do you want to load them in the car? He's like, I can't remember if I walked over there. We might have carried him down the street. He's like, I have a place right down here on Madison Street. Remember Forest Park? Toward Harlem, you know, east of where we were, south side of the street. So I think what happened was I want to say, I seem to remember carrying the stuff, like stacking the, yeah, I'm sure we did. Is the floor tom, and then the 13, the snare on top of that, and then the bass drum. And I think he carried the bass drum, and I carried the stack, you know, the other 3 drums, you know. So we're sort of parading down the street to his, and he had like an apartment above a storefront, which, by the way, that particular storefront, not that long before or after, I forgot, I was considering turning into Terry's Drums. Anyway, which never materialized. So we bring the stuff upstairs, and I think he had 2 or 3, well, at least 1 or 2 roommates, and it was like a rundown apartment, you know. And I remember one of his roommates is standing there, and he's like shaved, he's like, hey, how you doing? I mean, they were like, I felt like they were like maybe 2 or 3 vets, you know, that might have been like an early like in Vietnam, and they were sharing a joint, you know. So I was like, hey, you know, we went in, we brought the drums, and he's like, you know, into his room, and there was a bed there, and on the bed were all these Zildjian Ks. Now, not old, I mean, like brand new from a store K, you know, I think there was like a 20-inch ride, 14-inch hats, and, you know, 16, 18 crash. And he went to some music store somewhere out here in the, where did he get them from? Maybe Kagan and Gaines and Roosevelt, I don't know. So he's got the cymbals there, and I think he was still looking for stands. You know, I might have had some stands with the kit. In fact, I think I did. Yeah, there was maybe a snare stand and like 2 cymbal stands. And the bass drum did have the cymbal mount. But of course, you know, those original Gretsch things were useless. I think it did. It might have had an aftermarket there. Anyway, I forgot. Not that it matters. You know what I'm saying? So we have the stuff, and then I'm talking to him, and he's like, you know, and I sort of kind of started to show him how to set it up. He's like, I know how to set it up. And I'm like, okay. I said, well, listen, you know, Eddie, stay in touch. You know, call me if you need anything. Let me know if anything's broken or something. You know, he had my number, and so I didn't think much of it. And then, like, a couple days later, my brother's a policeman. I mentioned him, like, hey, man, you know, I saw those drums that were in the window. I'm like, you know, this guy came by, and he was kind of, you know, he was sort of disheveled, and, you know, Eddie, he's like, Eddie? He's like, a guy named Eddie bought your drums? I'm like, yeah. He goes, what do he look like? And I described him. Now, to me, Eddie, when I look at pictures after the fact of Eddie Ho, he kind of looks like if you took some Sonny Bono back in the day, and a little bit of like Dustin Hoffman, and that's sort of like Eddie Ho, you know. And my brother's like, Eddie Ho. He's like, dude, that dude's a famous drummer. And who did he say? He said he played. My brother was like, oh, he played with the Jimi Hendrix, or, you know, something my brother doesn't know, you know. So I went to the library and I checked it out, and sure enough, I saw like Donovan, Mamas and the Papas, Monkeys. I think he played, like I said, I think he played on Pleasant Valley Sunday and a bunch of other stuff. Like, it was a great, I think he played at Monterey Pop with Mamas and the Papas, I think. So, I'm like, wow. So that was Eddie Ho. And so this would have been 1996, 1997. And I've told this story a couple times on drum forums. And I was going to actually tell the story again, but then this fella, somebody on the Steve Hoffman forum, posted this thing and said he's like alive and well, like apparently alive and like well. Like he's taking questions, this fella is taking questions of all the other people on that forum and asking Eddie, and he's like, hey, you know, he didn't realize he's... So I presume it's legitimate. Eddie, I'm just saying, like back in the day, Eddie HOH seemed really, I mean, he was really out of it, you know. Anyway, so if anybody wants to maybe keep up on, you know, if you want to sort of, you know, log into the Steve Hoffman forum, check it out and maybe just see, you know, the questions this guy asks, you know. Apparently, according to this fella, he's alive and well now in 2015. So, but thanks for watching my videos. I have a couple semi-fresh videos I put up. I put the Bonzoleum promo video up, as well as a video of me in the studio, because I'm recording some stuff. I do have a record, Terry Keating Greatest Hits, an album. If you want to buy it on eBay, here it is. But I'm recording some new stuff which is going to be heavier and funkier and crazier and all types of mambo-ier. And I have other videos up. I put the Rover up. Anyway, it's Friday, February 13th, I think. Tomorrow's Valentine's Day, so don't forget. Your significant other, your girlfriend, your wife, don't forget. Go out right now and get a card. Get it out of the way. You don't want to wake up tomorrow and have your baby roll over and be like, you know, and you're like, I'm going to go turn the game on. Okay? So have a safe weekend. Safe but fun. More videos on the way. Thank you for subscribing. I really, really appreciate all the nice comments I get, and I really do. So keep coming back. No flipping. Thanks.